1. This happened a few months ago. The context required. At this point in time, I had just picked my mental health back up, after an extremely traumatic unconsensual episode. You can guess what. And was still struggling with a chronic inability to say no to people. I am a 21-year-old gay trans man, and while I never have trouble passing, I am still seen as very pretty and young-looking. So I was at a young people's event at my place of worship, which is completely accepting of all strokes of people, by the way. It was a lovely evening. I met a lot of great people, got a bit tipsy, and had a great time. That is until around 12:45 to 1 a.m., when things were starting to wind up. I went upstairs and met a man, looked approximately in his late 30s, called Tobias. Tobias was quite forward, complimenting my appearance, being familiar, asking about my sexuality. So I guessed that he was interested, but I didn't feel the same way. My place of worship has always been a safe place for me, so I assumed if I didn't flirt back, he'd get the message. Mea culpa. Shortly after, I went downstairs to put something in the bin, and he followed me. When we were alone, he kissed me. I pulled away and told him, "Sorry, I'm not available." He said, "Don't worry, neither am I," and gestured to his wedding ring. I laughed it off, turned, and walked back upstairs. And as we walked, Tobias told me, "Can't believe I just did that. Nothing happened. That didn't just happen." I nodded, and thought that was that. The evening was getting late. I decided to get home. I offered to walk a friend of mine to the station, and when she left to go to the bathroom, he asked where I was going. I said firmly, "I'm going to walk my friend to the station, and then I'm going home." She returned, and as we left, he decided to come along with us. I asked where he was headed. He said, "Oh, I'll go to the station for you." I reiterated that I was going straight home from that point. Along the way, my friend wanted me to get another drink and hang out, and I agreed. We were chatting, all seemed friendly, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable at Tobias' behavior. He was constantly complimenting me, telling me I was amazing, special, not like anyone he'd met, and kept touching me, putting his hands on my neck and down the back of my shirt, and kept trying to kiss me. FYI, this tactic is called love bombing, and is a big old red flag. He commented on some hickeys I had. "It was that. Who scarred you? Whoever it was, you think they're better than me? Really? Better than me? You let a boy do that to you?" I told him that it was someone I had known for a long time, and I reminded him that I wasn't single. He had kissed me around 4 times up to this point, and when he did, I would pull away, try and put distance between us, move my head so he wouldn't, laugh awkwardly, say, "We're in a shop, please don't. I'm not what you're looking for, you don't know me," etc. This man straight up tried to make out with me 1 meter away from some poor shopkeeper serving us. Ugh. He squeezed my waist and commented on how skinny and small I was, asked me how old I was, and commented, "Wow, you look so young. You look like you're 17. Sexy, not?" He asked me if I was attracted to him, and I shrugged, shook my head, and said, "Sorry, I'm very into the person I'm with, and I can't even look at anyone else when I like someone." At this point, I should have told him to screw off. In fact, I should have said that a long time before. But when it's actually happening, it's surprisingly difficult to get a bearing on when you can start being rude. Which is exactly what people who behave like this rely on, a vulnerable person's fear of making a scene. Or else they actually believe that this behavior means the person wants to be persuaded. Yuck. Back to the story. We all decided to sit on a bench, as all the pubs were shut. I sat on the end and my friend next to me. Tobias whined that I wasn't sitting next to him. My friend asked why that mattered, and he said, "Oh, you know, because I want him to. Never mind. I'm being too much, I'm going too far." I tried to steer the conversation away from him flirting, but he kept standing and walking to where I was sitting to kiss me, crouching by me and putting his hands on my knees. He didn't want to tell us how old he was because he was afraid I wouldn't like him. but he did eventually confess he was 37. In an attempt to stop him being interested in me, I revealed I was transgender, and he put his hand up my shirt, saying, "Wow, you really think I would judge you for that? You have no idea who I am. I see you." Side note, the fuck is this? Avatar? "I would never care. I'll still do everything with you." He meant sexually. I wiggled away as far as I was able and said something along the lines of, "Well, thank you, but I'm not interested." My friend had somehow misread the situation as me enjoying this behavior, probably because I'm a bloke. I texted another friend to call me, so that I could get 5 minutes away from the situation. Walked up the street, explained everything and made a plan, which was a really good idea. Talking out loud about it, I finally registered that this wasn't right, that I was totally in the right to be uncomfortable and want to GTFO. I returned and told everyone that I was going home. The second I came back, he tried to kiss me, and told me he was worried and had tried to come looking for me. I moved my head so he couldn't and told him, "Please don't, I'm going home." I texted the friend I was with, "Help," and she immediately started saying that we were going home, he should go home too, and that her and I were leaving together now. He asked me, "What's changed? You've come back different. Who were you talking to? What's going on?" I told him I'm uncomfortable and I'm going home now. He said, "What are you talking about? Have I made you uncomfortable?" "Yes, I'm going home now." Up to this point, I can definitely see that my lack of rudeness and conflict avoidance tactics had actually made the situation worse, and given him the impression that I could be persuaded to do whatever he wanted, or somehow had led him on. So now that I've been absolutely crystal clear, he should back off, right? Wrong. He said, "Wow, who are you talking to? What's happened? Whoever it is, don't throw this away. I know we had a connection. You're so special." I said, "I only met you this evening. You made me feel uncomfortable, and you should ask before you kiss people." "Well, I can't believe this. You're trying to turn this around on me." "I know you're drunk, it's fine. I just want to go home now." "Oh, I'm completely sober. I'm not drunk." At this point, my friend stepped in and tried to assure him everything was fine and convince him to go home. He asked me for one last kiss and I shook my head, "No, thank you." He said, "Don't throw this away," and tried to touch my face. I reiterated, "I met you this evening. I don't know you. I want to go home." "Can I at least have a hug?" And immediately tried to hug me. I pushed him away and said, "I would rather not." "Wow, you're making me feel uncomfortable now." I said I would rather not. "Please respect my boundaries. I want to go home." My friend again tried to tell him to go home. He said, "No, you're making me feel like I've done something wrong. I just want a hug." "Oh, I know what this is. You're just not used to people accepting you for who you are. You can't handle that I accept you and see you for who you are." I mean, really? That's not the case. I have plenty of people who accept me, but you've made me feel uncomfortable and I'm going home. At this point, I was stood up, backed against the edge of the bench with him, standing barely a foot away. I had started shaking because I was feeling anxious, so I just walked away up the street. My friend stayed with him, convincing him to go home. He didn't follow us. I took her to the station and got myself into an Uber. Next day, I handed a report very similar to this into the security at my place of worship, and the dude was promptly barred from entry. I hope people can see the mechanisms of how this situation was set up, and can find confidence to be far more outspoken than I was, because by being polite, I made the situation worse. I know it's not my fault, but I'm very grateful that I'm not timid like I used to be, and am now able to be absolutely firm if needs be, rude about setting my boundaries. Therapy is a hell of a drug, and it's doing me wonders. So, married creep double my age, let's not meet again, for your sake. 2. This is a bizarre and scary story about something that happened to a friend and I over 10 years ago. And to give you some background, this was in a country in South America, where daylight robberies are pretty common, sadly. And also in this country we had, or have, problems with insurgent groups. It was our last semester in university, and really we were like 3 weeks away from finishing classes, so we were working on the final projects for some of them. One day, 2 friends and I stayed after classes to work on a project, and left for home around 4 in the afternoon, not too late, mind you, and we walked down the street for around 10 minutes to get on our respective buses. Approximately 5 minutes after I got on the bus, I got a call from one of my friends, which was weird in itself because we had just parted ways. So I answered the call, and he had this very unusual tone. I mean, it was him. I could just hear something strange in his voice. And he told me he needed my help with something, but couldn't tell me over the phone. So he asked me to come to where he was waiting with the bus, which was basically where I had gotten on mine. I begrudgingly acceded and hung up. Again, I felt something was wrong. As I came off the bus, I decided to walk back. Being a poor university student and all, wanted to keep some money for the bus back home. But instead of taking the usual route, I took a detour that would allow me to assess my friend's situation without being noticed, and I did so. However, that's when I made a mistake. Unfortunately, I'm nearsighted, and even with glasses, it is sometimes hard to distinguish things clearly over long distances. Although I was able to see my friend with someone else who were both looking at the opposite side to where I was coming from. So I was correct in taking that detour. However, my mistake was that, to me, over that distance, the other guy looked a lot like a classmate of ours that would hang out with my friend in question. Let's call my friend Sam and the classmate Jake. So Jake used to go to casinos a lot and gamble a lot of money. And because he was good friends with Sam, I thought Jake had run out of money, was asking to borrow money from Sam, and Sam had asked me to come to see if I could lend the guy some money. Those were my thoughts, so I just kept walking, already thinking an excuse to not lend money. When I came close enough, they both turned their heads and looked at me, and to my surprise, the other guy wasn't Jake. It was a stranger who was with Sam. Immediately I thought the worst. As I approached, the guy introduced himself with the name Eric, presumably fake, and went on to say he was part of one of these insurgent groups, and that he was there investigating an assault toward the daughter of one of their affiliates the night before. Apparently, the person who assaulted this girl was a male student from our university, who usually was in a group of 3 guys at the time, and that he approached us because he saw us leave the university in a group of 3. He fucking saw us leave the university. So he went on with his BS, saying that he wanted to verify that we weren't the ones who perpetrated this assault, and that we shouldn't do anything suspicious, otherwise he will pull out his gun and shoot us. That he wasn't afraid to shoot in public. Keep this in mind. Up to this point, we hadn't seen any guns or knives or anything remotely intimidating, only his words. The guy was working our psyche. The sad and now funny part is that 2 more students from our university came back to where we were. Eric was giving them the same BS before he got to us, and he asked them to walk a few blocks and come back to prove their trustworthiness. I feel so stupid right now as I write this. I mean, think about this, 4 guys against 1. We could have overpowered him somehow, but he kept saying that there were people hiding that could hurt us at any moment, should we decide to do anything stupid. Who would have known? It now sounds like BS to me. Anyway, he said that by our looks and our words, none of us were the guy he was looking for, and that we were in the clear. However, he wasn't going to let us go that easily. That he needed to take some things from us so that it appeared to be a common mugging, so he made us follow him. He kept asking questions. He said it wasn't a kidnapping, otherwise we would have already been blindfolded in a car going somewhere else. Unless we were the kids of someone important, in which case he needed to make a call. We followed him for, I think, 30 minutes or so, and as he took our money, watches and cell phones, he said we had to walk back and wait in front of the university for more instructions, and that we needed to do so because he had people watching us. Also, he said we couldn't talk to anyone at all or, they would hurt us. So he sent us back to the university separately, with like 5 minutes of a difference each. I felt it was the longest walk I had ever taken, and during that walk, I prayed that I wouldn't run into anyone. I also looked at everyone with suspicion. After what seemed like an hour, I finally made my way back to the university, and all the others, including Sam, were there waiting. and we waited silently for like 30 minutes. Until we finally spoke and decided to go home, or try, I mean. The guy left us with like $1 each to go back home, which of course wasn't enough. Sam and I went back into the university. Thankfully, they had phone booths, so we called home, and our parents picked us up. All in all, we were missing for like 4 or 5 hours, which of course caused some commotion at home. Because last I spoke with Mom that day, I was already on the bus on my way home. So the guy with the convoluted gorillas story, who scarred 4 full students, let's not meet again. 3. I was maybe 8 or 9 at this point. I'm from one of those towns that at the time were very small, and the 3 words to describe this town were sports, especially soccer, religion, and families. Specifically, of the kind with young children. Everyone was nice, a lot of Karens. Now, my family was, of course, a part of this pattern. Don't you dare think my mother was a Karen, with a slight variation. My 3 siblings were 7 to 11, yes, I know, years older than me, meaning I would walk across town from school alone. I also had to leave my neighborhood and walk for a solid few blocks before I came to any of my friends' houses. But this town being the town that it is, my mother would let me walk alone, especially because I knew the route so well due to my friend's house being along my walk home from school. My mother befriended a very Christian couple who sort of became my pseudo-grandparents, because all of mine were either dead, demented, or disowned. We weren't particularly Christian, but we went to a lot of meetings they would have on Sundays, Thanksgiving. Gifts would be exchanged on birthdays, my brother and I would sleep over, etc. Now enter the second couple. The wife was a total sweetheart. No idea what country she was from. We could barely communicate. A lot of sitting on her lap and getting treats. Barely taller than me, I adored that woman. I didn't pay much attention to her husband, and frankly, I don't remember much of him from that time. He was just some guy that turned out to live just up the street from us and a block over. A block I had to pass to get to my friend's house. This is where it gets a little complicated. I had a friend that lived right behind the second couple's house. I had to walk through their driveway and walk behind their house to get to her house. The first time I had an encounter with him, I was a little weirded out, but I didn't think much of it. He saw that I had rung the doorbell of my friend's house, and he said they were at the cabin, but they'd be back later that afternoon. I was welcome to come inside and wait with him until they arrived, and that he was my friend's grandfather. There was just something about him that seemed off. My 8-year-old angsty senses were picking up on something. Me, being the mild-mannered and cautious little girl I was raised to be, just smiled and said it was fine, and I'd go to another friend's home, and so I did. The problem is, I should have gone straight home. This friend lives further away from my home, and this meant that I would have to pass his house on my way back as well. However, at the time, I didn't see him as a threat. It wasn't until he would be standing outside his house waiting for me every day when I walked home from school that I caught that something was very, very wrong. I would run past his house and whisper to myself, "Please don't come out, please don't come out." And lo and behold, he'd come running after me. Every time I would have to find a new excuse for why I couldn't come inside with him. A lot of the times he would smell like booze. Every time he'd complain about having no friends, and I was so nice, and he just wanted us to be friends. This is so long ago that I could be wrong, but it was no longer than a month. This was during the fall, and it rained pretty heavily, and my father was home from work for whatever reason. So he picked me up from school a couple of times, so that I wouldn't come home soaked and most likely catch a cold. Me, wearing a jacket? Funny. I never told my parents about this because I was scared of how they'd react. I never saw his wife around when he'd do this, and I don't think she was ever aware until that phone call. Another fall afternoon, another friend I was walking home from, another encounter. I remember this very vividly because I can't remember ever having been so scared of anything that I had to run home. I had one of those phones you could only text. Call and play 3 games with. Pre-2010, pre-smartphones, ideal for a 9-year-old that was never home. I was so anxious now when I had to walk past that house, I think I even held my breath because I was afraid he'd hear me. I might have been stupid. but I wasn't an idiot. I knew even at that age what could happen to little girls. I nearly pass his house. I exhale. And then I hear him coming down the stairs. I keep walking. He comes up to me, and though I really did not want to, I stopped. He said he'd missed me, and how he had waited for me, but I never came. Again, he asked if I'd come inside. My excuse was that my mom had made dinner, and she had spent so long making it, she'd be so sad if I didn't come home, and it'd be wasted. If it was one thing I was good at that age, it was lying to get out of situations I did not want to be in. Then he called me a good little girl for not wanting to let my mother down, and hugged me tightly. To this day I remember how he leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Yes, go home and eat, but you'll come right back here afterward, won't you?" For whatever reason, something told me that I should say yes, just so that he'd be more inclined to let me go. By the time I got home, I had already decided to spill the beans. I told my parents all of it, as far as my 9-year-old brain could muster. And they were having none of it. They called the wife and asked to speak to him, and my mother told him that I had told them everything and to leave me alone or they'd contact the police. He apparently just made some grunting sound and hung up. I don't remember how much later this was, but it was warm enough for us to sit outside, and the sun was high in the sky. Might have been the summer after this incident. My father had a friend who had 2 children who were older than me, who lived with their mom, and 2 very small children with his new wife. He also knew this guy, but he didn't know about what happened until that day when my father told him. The guy didn't know my parents and I were there, and at this point, my parents didn't let me stay behind in the neighborhood with my friends if they so much as went to get groceries. All I remember was seeing him approaching the house, and according to my father's friend, he was here to borrow some tools. He and my father closed the gate behind them on their way out into the driveway. We were on the patio and couldn't see what happened over the 7-foot-tall fence. I heard some bangs and angry whispering. It wasn't until years later I learned that my father had threatened to kill him if he ever came close to me or any of my siblings ever again. Last time I saw him was my 18th birthday when my sisters took me to a bar, legal drinking age here, and life has clearly not been good to him. So moral of the very long story is, do not force your children to be nice if they are uncomfortable. Allow them to say no. A lot of creepers prey on children's sympathy. Help me look for my lost puppy, I need help. Ted Bundy, anyone? It is very difficult to learn stranger danger whilst also remaining respectful and nice. This wasn't even stranger danger, this was a man I knew, and who my parents initially liked. In most abduction and assault cases, it is by a person close to the family or in the victim's extended circle. I am about to become an aunt for the first time, and my father is about to become a grandfather. So, family friend turned creep for your sake, let's not meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 437. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Extra super duper big thanks to everyone who has allowed me to use stories in the past week, because I was acquiring all the stories much earlier than I usually would, and you made what could have been a difficult job much easier on me, so it is very much appreciated. That also means that as you listen to this, I'm coming back from what was a second week off. 2 weeks off in a year, can you... Oof. Well done, Hellfreezer, can you believe that? I won't take another break till Christmas time, and I must say, putting this one together was a lot easier than the last one. I've been sleeping properly. Probably because I wasn't as frazzled going into it, which has helped. And that's something I'm going to have to do about maybe once every 3 months, I think would be a good idea to do that. Just to keep me well rested and focused, and also means on my weeks off, rather, I'll have a bit of time so I can work on little extra projects, just for the kind of the projects I do just for the sheer fun of it. Not that I don't enjoy the rest of it, but there are some things I certainly don't do for the views. Like Dracula, for instance, and the Jack stories, and I just do them because they're fun, and there is an audience there for them, so I like to make sure I do them for those folks. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.